Hi everyone, I'm Amanda Kendle from the Thoughtful Travel podcast, and this is a presentation series on how to be a better traveller for the City of Joondalup libraries. As COVID-19 travel restrictions start to lift, it's a great time to think about how to travel more thoughtfully, and this series will help you do just that. This presentation is about how to be an environmentally friendly traveller. I think that's something we probably all aspire to. We don't want to damage the environment or be eco-unfriendly when we travel. And there's probably lots of things we know about already, but I thought I'd put together this presentation just to remind us and perhaps give all of us some other ideas and food for thought about how we can be environmentally friendly travellers. To start off with, I have a short extract from an interview I did with Louise Sutherland, a travel journalist who is a bit of an expert in environmentally friendly travel.
There's lots of different things we can do. To organise them in my mind, I often put them into categories. So there's things about carbon emissions. So that would be choosing how we get somewhere, maybe offsetting the carbon emissions we can't avoid, choosing low impact modes of transport such as electric vehicles or bikes or sea kayaks or hiking instead of doing a driving trip. I don't know if you know, Hurtigrute has just launched 2 hybrid cruise ships, so you might want to choose those kind of ships instead of the regular ones. So there's carbon emissions, that's one category. The second one would be food. So I guess looking at where your food is sourced when you're away. Not always easy, but low food miles and even 0-kilometre restaurants are becoming more common, organic places. So I guess food that's local, organic, seasonal, plant-based, choosing plant-based options when you travel, which also has the added advantage of keeping you healthier, because in some countries like India, it's probably better for you to eat the plants than the meat, which you don't know how it's been prepared or stored, things like that. This third one may be waste. I guess plastic is the most obvious thing, but, trying not to use single-use plastics, trying to patronize places, hotels or restaurants that don't use single-use plastics, even taking your own reusable not just bottles and cups, but cutlery and lunch boxes and shopping bags, things like that, which is just a no-brainer now. Everyone seems to be doing that. Well, not everyone, I guess. But
not everyone, but it's certainly way more widespread. Yeah.
Yes. And a lot of hotels now are switching from tiny toiletries to bulk dispensers. Which is something I always look at now when I go to hotels. And if it's got the tiny toiletries, they get a little black mark against their name, because it's so common. And it's just, so we've got carbon emissions, food, waste, and I guess positive impact would be another one. Some hotels or eco lodges will plant a tree for every guest to offset their emissions. You might look at, there might be places that run cleanup days or just places that give back.
On top of Lou's thoughts, I wanted to put together 5 main ideas about how we can travel in a more environmentally friendly way. So these are the 5 that I've considered probably a combination of the most important and the ones where we can make a difference the most easily. So the first one is reducing our carbon footprint, also reducing litter and waste, recycling, avoiding bottled water, because although that might be covered by those other 2, it's one of the biggest culprits and needs to be addressed separately. And finally, being aware of greenwashing. So let's take those in a bit more detail. First of all, how can we reduce our carbon footprint? How can we reduce carbon emissions connected to our travels? Obviously, flying is not good in terms of carbon emissions, as is cruising. But if we think about flights, and when we live in Australia, especially here in Perth, it's quite hard to get many places without flying. So there's a few things we can do, but one of them is to at least have non-stop flights where possible. So sometimes we might take multiple flights because it's cheaper. If we can stretch to have a non-stop flight, then that makes a big difference to our carbon emissions, because the biggest chunk of those emissions are coming from taking off and landing. We can also pack light, because that does make a difference to the emissions of an aircraft. If all of us packed a lot less, that would be a big difference again. Where possible, when we're in our destination, if we can use public transport over driving, then that's better. Also driving over flying if we're going a relatively short distance, and also considering if we're renting a vehicle, or even purchasing, considering using electric vehicles. So that's a bunch of ways that are not too difficult to do to try and reduce our carbon footprint. Now, another important issue is trying to reduce the amount of litter and waste we produce. You've probably seen those horrifying pictures of places like in Nepal, getting up towards where the popular climbs are, and there's just a sea of plastic water bottles and things like that, and waste, and it's a little bit scary. So here's a few things that we can do, a lot of which you're probably doing already, but you might not necessarily do it when you travel. So one thing is to take with you things like reusable cutlery or reusable straws, the things that you'll generally be given if you're, say, buying food, especially takeaway food. But if you took your own, then you could say, no thanks, I don't need to create that waste. Similarly, taking with you a keep cup or some kind of thermos for hot drinks. Now, this is, of course, something we're much more familiar with these days, but don't forget to do it when you travel too, because you might visit some destinations where plastic bags are still rife. So take with you your reusable bags, tote bags, and the like. Another way to help with the reduction of litter and waste, and especially with it, getting into the ecosystem and causing harm, is to consider if you're going on a hike or a walk, take something with you, a bag with you where you can collect it, and pick up the litter on your way. Now, I've got a bit of an interview from guidebook writer Anna Chittenden on some other ways you can reduce litter and waste on your travels.
So I think that there's just like a lot of ways that people can just try and be sustainable, like once they get to the destination. And I think that there's lots of kind of like easy things that people can do. So I think that there's like the obvious things like, taking your own bags when you're going, like taking tote bags when you're going somewhere, because especially in, I find this in places like Singapore and even Japan, they like to give you a lot of plastic,
a lot of nice packaging.
So everything they want to give you, it's in plastic, and then another plastic, and then another plastic. So I think a lot of it is just by like saying, like, refusing, saying no, and then just bringing your own small tote bag, so you can just like refuse any, like, as much plastic as people try and give you. So like bring your own tote bags, bring your own coffee cups and water bottles. So just like bringing as much as you can, so you don't become one of those annoying people that's actually just like using more plastic while you're traveling, and actually like adding to the problem. Because especially in places, it might be somewhere like Indonesia as well, they might not have the infrastructure there to cope with more of the plastic and the waste. So I think it's just like bringing as much as you can, and just saying no if someone tries to give you sort of like plastic, and bringing your own cups and everything.
Related to all of this is, of course, making sure that you are recycling and trying to support businesses that are doing good recycling as well. So, for example, when you're deciding on your accommodation, you might check into hotel recycling programs. And if, in particular, they don't use what we call tiny toiletries, those tiny bottles of shampoo or shower gel, then that would be a big tick for them, and you could use them above other hotels. Sometimes this is unavoidable. Well, as a consumer, it's sometimes unavoidable, and you might end up in a hotel where you do end up using those tiny toiletries. If you do, if it's truly unavoidable, then at least take the leftovers with you to use. Those half bottles will otherwise just get chucked out a lot of the time, and that's even worse than them existing in the first place, I think. And of course, make sure you're doing your own recycling, whatever you're buying. If you're buying things in recyclable packaging, make sure that packaging ends up in a recycling bin wherever possible. Now, as I mentioned earlier, bottles of water are one of the worst culprits in terms of damage to the environment when we're out and about on our travels. And there's a few reasons for this. And of course, one of them is that if we're traveling in a country where the water isn't as safe to drink as here in Australia, then we're even more likely to be drinking from bottled water. So there's a few things you can do, for example, using a refillable water bottle or using a water purifier. And I've got some information from tour operator Bridie Reid about some more alternatives to buying plastic water bottles.
So the first thing is the reusable water bottle. Of course, everyone knows about this, but there are a couple of little twists to this because, you know, I think when you have a refillable water bottle, this is really, really good when you are traveling to a place where there is drinkable water.
Mm-hmm.
However,
isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. And I think, you know, it's becoming easier to go into a cafe or a restaurant and ask for them to fill it up. Like, it can feel a little bit weird, but I think everyone is understanding that it's worth the effort to do that and maybe the discomfort. And I think restaurants and hotels are becoming more good about it. However, you know, when you're traveling to a place that doesn't have potable water, this can be a real issue for a few reasons. Number one, you know, bottled water is often a big source of income in certain little cafes and restaurants, and that can be an issue. And of course, the scourge of the plastic water bottle, and particularly in places where there's not much recycling. So I would like to suggest a couple of things that you can have in your little zero waste travel kit. The first is like an emergency plan B, which is just these water purification tablets that you can buy. And these tiny little tablets, they are really effective at purifying water. You know, if you're going hiking in Europe and you need to take water from streams, for example, or if you're in a place where there's no potable water, you just add one of these tablets into a litre of water and you will have clean water in half an hour. So that's a really good thing to have. They're super light, they're super easy to pack, they're great. But there are these other two products that I have both of these and I find them really, really great. One's called a Steripen. Are you familiar with the Steripen?
I've heard of it, but I don't exactly know how it works.
Right, so it's purification of water through a UV light, and it's basically like a little wand, and you turn it on and you put it in your litre of water and you stir and agitate the water for 90 seconds and your water is clean. It's really quite cool. And I always tell people, because people I think are a little bit skeptical about it, but just go online, look at the research behind how effective this is and, you know, decide for yourself.
Now, finally, one important thing to be wary about when you are planning your travels and trying to be more environmentally friendly is greenwashing. So this is especially the case if you are looking into a hotel or a tour company or even an airline and you're trying to decide, is this the more environmentally friendly alternative? So greenwashing is, of course, comes from the idea of whitewashing. And greenwashing is when an organization or a company like that tries to make themselves sound really green friendly, really environmentally sound. But sometimes it's just a lot of words without much meaning behind it. They might just even call themselves, you know, a green hotel, but without anything to back that up. So just be a little bit aware that greenwashing is a thing. It's a really marketable thing and people think, oh yeah, okay, they're environmentally sound, I'll go there. But just be aware that there's something to back that up. It's not just words. So ways to do that are to check if the company has some affiliations or certifications with some reputable organizations. You can also just look out for their kind of openness and transparency. So a genuinely eco-friendly company will usually discuss this at some length on their website, not just use the phrases, you know, sustainable or green. There'll be some clearer explanation about what they do. And if you're in doubt, ask questions. You're a consumer and you're allowed to ask questions of a company before you decide to spend your money with them. So just ask them directly, you know, what do you do about this? Do you recycle this? Or, you know, whatever it is that you have concerns about. And I think the more that we as consumers do that, the more that those companies will realize that they can't be doing this greenwashing. They need to be genuine. So I hope that those tips have given you some more ideas about how you can be an environmentally friendly traveller. You often will hear, well, I sometimes read, and it worries me, people saying that we shouldn't travel because it's not an environmentally friendly thing to do, especially with things like flying. However, I think that the benefits of travel far outweigh that, and even the benefits to the environment of us traveling and learning more about the world. So along with the fact that we're never going to stop traveling completely, because all of us, anyone watching this, is probably hardwired to want to travel. So the best thing to do is take some of these tips and more and try and find ways that you can be a really environmentally friendly traveller and enjoy it. Thanks for watching.